When you're questioning your gender identity, it's easy to want certainty. Humans are wired to stay with the pack, to do what's safe, not to seek change or strike out on their own. Changing your gender identity goes against all of those. It's scary, isolating, uncertain, and especially in modern society where anti-trans sentiment seems to be continually rising, it can even be dangerous. So it's easy to see why people who are questioning their gender want to feel that certainty before they pursue any form of transition. So how do you know? Before we get into the questions to ask yourself, I want to start with some basic definitions. We all come in with a slightly different idea of what gender means, and it can be helpful to review how these terms are actually defined to understand what our own questioning means. So sex refers to our physical characteristics. It's male or female or intersex, and typically that includes our primary sex characteristics, which are the actual organs that we have, and our secondary sex characteristics, including things like the definition of our muscles, body fat distribution, hair growth, and so many more factors. Gender is a lot more abstract. There is a certain group of people that tends to think of gender as aligned with our sex assigned at birth. That if you're male, you're a man, if you're female, you're a woman, but typically those people don't account for the existence of intersex people, and that line of thinking is actually why so many intersex people have been forced into surgeries to help them better align with expectations around that binary gender identity in the first place. So it's damaging to everybody to have a binary view of gender. Instead, gender is a more abstract concept. It's a spectrum of identities based on our internal sense of self. And so as a society, while we may generally group most people into genders like man and woman based off of secondary sex characteristics that we perceive, not everyone aligns with those labels. Many of us, myself included, realize at some point in our lives that that gender identity doesn't match how we actually feel inside. And that disconnection is called dysphoria. It can be a disconnection between the label you were assigned at birth and how you actually feel inside. It can be a disconnection between your body and how you feel inside, or it could be a disconnection between how other people see you and how you see yourself. Dysphoria at the end of the day is just a disconnect when it comes to the topic of gender identity. Current research suggests that our brains are kind of pre-wired before we're born to prefer more estrogen or more testosterone. And so when we're born into a body that produces a certain amount of each of those naturally, if there's an imbalance between what our body is making and what our brain is wired to need, that can turn into gender dysphoria. And for people who do feel dysphoria, many of them identify as different gender identities than the one they were given at birth. And anyone who identifies as a different gender than that birth gender is called transgender. And non-binary just means that your internal gender identity doesn't align with either male or female, with man or woman. So now that we got that out of the way, how do you know if your gender identity does or doesn't align with the sex you were assigned at birth? So if you are trans or non-binary, before you come out, you will go through what is usually a long questioning period. This often starts as a different presentation than gender dysphoria because typically we don't yet have the language to talk about gender or what dysphoria feels like. So a lot of times this can look like things like generalized anxiety, depression, low self-esteem. In other words, because of that imbalance between your perceived identity and what your brain needs, your brain knows something is wrong, but it doesn't yet have the words or concepts to express it. And so if you're watching this video, that might be where you are now. And if you're in that place, the best thing to do is start by questioning and noticing. You should question your foundational concepts of gender. And even if you're cis, this is something I think everyone should do. How would I look or act if I was outside of all social expectations on a deserted island all by myself? Do I feel more connected just emotionally to the label of man, woman, or neither? Or maybe both? And do the current gender labels that I use, man, woman, non-binary, he, him, they, feel uncomfortable? And if they do, why? And as you start to think about these concepts of gender, it's very important that you start noticing. Once you start to pay attention to your body's signals, you can understand a lot more about your true gender identity and how your body is experiencing dysphoria, euphoria, and gender. So as you go about your day, take the time to notice things like, when do I think about gender? Clearly, if you're watching this video or questioning your identity, you do think about gender. So when do those feelings come up? How do I feel about my body? Like overall, how do I feel about my body? But especially, how do I feel about my primary and secondary sex characteristics? Are there certain parts and specific aspects of my body that make me uncomfortable or not? How do I feel in clothes that are masculine or feminine? And to get an understanding of what those clothes are is literally just to look at the labels or the section they're in. How do I feel in men's clothing or in women's clothing? And how do I feel when other people use gendered terms toward me? So when people call me he or she, when they use terms like dude or bro or girl, what feelings do those trigger, if any? My own personal gender identity journey exactly followed that trajectory, where I started with self-esteem issues that I couldn't quite pinpoint, that I now realize looking back were my brain just telling me something is wrong. But when I started to hear terms about gender like non-binary and trans, primarily on social media, I became interested. I took sort of this undue interest in what gender identity meant, and as I heard more and more experiences, I realized those aligned with my own. I always felt discomfort with acting masculine, and I had a lot of confusion of why certain feminine things felt good and why I felt the desire to wear a lot of jewelry, grow my hair out, wear a skirt, all before I ever truly questioned my gender identity. But even with all of those questions, I always just thought I was a man who liked feminine things, who wasn't very masculine, who had certain leanings, until I was at a concert where the lead singer, who is non-binary, spoke to their own experiences with gender identity and labeled what they felt gender dysphoria. And that's the moment that everything clicked. I immediately knew that was what I had been experiencing, and I finally had a label for all of that confusion. Once you realize that what you may be feeling is gender dysphoria, fear and doubt can set in. Because as you start to realize you may not align with the label you were given at birth, you realize that your life might become a lot harder. That you might come to realizations that involve changing yourself and that potentially involve losing certain parts of the current life that you lead. In other words, the initial relief that you felt at finally having that feeling named is quickly squashed by all of the uncertainty and the weight of the journey that lies ahead of you if you continue down that path. And we don't need to get into the politics of all this in this video, but gender generally is supported as a social construct because it's a means of controlling society. So if we believe that most people fall into man or woman based off the sex they were assigned at birth, then that means trans people challenge the status quo and they challenge the patriarchy, so they become the targets of oppression, discrimination, and hate. A lot of us carry around some internalized transphobia, and I think this is something that can scare people back into the closet for a long time or potentially forever. It would be a beautiful thing if we could just accept that being trans or non-binary or anywhere on the gender spectrum is totally normal and something that a lot of people feel, but we're not there yet. And depending on how and where you were raised, internalized transphobia may also start to crop up as you question your gender identity. So part of coming out is not only figuring out who you are, but also deconstructing any transphobic feelings that may arise. So questioning your gender is not just a process of figuring out who you are, but also understanding what that means about how the world will perceive you and dealing with uncomfortable feelings of transphobia that may arise. And you'll probably also realize you have a lot of misconceptions about both gender identity and what it means to be trans. Because I started to question my identity in my early 20s, and I had this notion that people who were trans always knew, or that they just always had this really strong feeling that they were trans, and that wasn't the case for me. So layer by layer, I questioned all of my discomfort with being labeled a man and all of the expectations that came with it, and slowly started to figure out my own gender identity. Something that really helped me when I was dealing with that early doubt and uncertainty in my gender journey was to label thoughts that I knew a cisgender person wouldn't think. because I had spent a lifetime raised and socialized around cis men, so I knew how they thought about things like femininity and masculinity. So when I questioned things like the fact that I didn't like my body hair, or that I would totally get rid of all of my facial hair, or that like when I was growing my hair out, I wanted it to appear softer and more feminine and not masculine, all of those things were not cisgender thoughts. And the more I normalized that to myself, the more comfortable and okay I felt with being not cisgender. The more that you pay attention to the little signals your brain is giving you, the more you'll understand where you actually do feel comfortable. And so just by noticing and asking questions, you'll be well on your way to figuring out your identity. But the only way to be certain is experimentation. You can sit around and think about your gender identity all day long, but because so much of gender is social, it's in presentation, it's in how we externalize the way we feel inside, you'll never truly know until you try it. You won't know if it feels right to hear someone else say non-binary or they or she or he unless you try it out. And once something does feel right, you'll know. In a way, it's like swimming where the water is warm. For most of your life, if you've been living with gender dysphoria, you've been swimming against a current that you didn't know existed. You've been in cold water that didn't quite feel comfortable and you never knew why. But when you find what feels warm, stay there. Don't let it get away. That's true of the questions you ask yourself, but it's also true in the experimentation phase. You should keep trying things out. Anything you have an inkling that might feel right for you, and see if it actually does. And you can do this in baby steps too, because experimentation feels big and scary, and it's the start of becoming who you really are in the world. But it doesn't have to be all at once. For me, baby steps looked like first using different labels to myself and in the mirror. When I had an inkling that I might want to use they, them pronouns or identify as non-binary, I said those things to myself first, tried them on, saw how they felt. And if your appearance is a source of dysphoria or discomfort, you can try experimenting with your appearance in private. Like you can order clothes from eBay or Mercari, or go to a thrift store and get clothes that you think you might like to try. Things that are different from your current style, that maybe are labeled as a different gender identity, put them on and see how they feel. And a lot of times what I've found is that the things that I really like wearing and presenting about my body are things that I just was hiding or avoiding out of fear of judgment. And from there, you can socially transition. If you think that being trans or non-binary is right for you and you've tried it out to yourself and it feels good, talk to some trusted friends or maybe a family member. Have them use your labels and see if that feels right coming from another person. And as you keep taking these baby steps, as you keep questioning and trying things on, eventually you'll find the combination of everything that feels harmonious and right for you. And going where the water is warm may eventually lead to bigger steps. Things like medically transitioning, which can be getting on hormones or getting surgery. It may be coming out to everyone you know, or coming out publicly with your identity after you've confided in your trusted circle. Or you might question and try all these things and realize you're actually comfortable where you are. And that's okay too. This process can take a long time, and that's okay. I myself was in denial for several years, starting with baby steps of questioning my appearance and what being a man meant, until it finally broke down that I wasn't actually a man. And from there, it took a while to start to rebuild an identity and an appearance in the world that felt comfortable. And the more you grow okay with the fact that there will never be an end destination to a gender journey, the better time you'll have just pursuing what feels right to you. So if you're trying to answer the question, how do I know if I'm non-binary or trans? The answer is that you'll never truly know for certain until you try it. So once you've gathered enough information about how you might like to label yourself from questioning and noticing, start with baby steps. Just keep trying out different things that might feel right until you find what sticks. And eventually, I believe we can all get to a place where what we feel inside feels right.